What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 20 preview. So I'm going to talk about the injury to Jarrod Bowen, the suspension with Morgan Rogers, and possible midfielder replacements. Then I'm going to answer some of your questions as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start with Jarrod Bowen. Nice and simple. West Ham have confirmed that he sustained a fractured foot injury against Liverpool on Sunday and is expected to be out until at least February. So if you're someone that's still got him in your team, that is a pretty easy sell for me. If we look at the fixtures for West Ham coming up, the game in February, the first one, is Monday the 3rd of February against Chelsea away. There's 4 game weeks before that. Like, he's just not worth keeping in your squad at 7.5 million. That money can be better spent. Should you take a hit to remove him? Possibly not if you've got a good 8th attacker. But because he has to go anyway, I'd be tempted to move him on to someone else if you're in a position where the first 11's not looking great and obviously you know he's not going to be back for a while. I'll talk about replacements in a little bit. I just want to talk about another midfielder that's not going to be available for Game Week 20 first. So Morgan Rogers isn't injured like Jarrod Bowen, but he is going to miss Game Week 20 through suspension. He picked up his 5th yellow card of the season against Brighton, which is really unfortunate to be missing out Leicester at home in Game Week 20. If you played him in Game Week 19, you did get a goal and assist, so we probably can't complain too much, but still not nice to lose him for such a good fixture. Key question is, do you keep him in your squad or do you look to move him on? After Leicester at home in 20, it's Everton away in 21, Arsenal away in 22, then West Ham at home, Wolves away, Ipswich at home. So apart from that Arsenal away game, the fixture run is not all that bad for Morgan Rogers. And because for a lot of us, Rogers is that 8th attacker, you can probably bench him against Arsenal anyway. So my general feelings are, if you've got to switch him to like Amad Diallo or Enzo Fernandez or someone like that because of funds, I would personally prefer to keep hold of Rogers if you can deal with it this week. If you've got a lot of money in the bank or you're making a downgrade somewhere else and you can move up to someone like Anthony Gordon at Newcastle and you kind of restructure your funds a little bit, then I quite like that as a move because that's quite a big upgrade over the next few weeks. But if you're sticking in and around this price, I think I'd prefer keeping hold of Rogers, especially if you got him for 5 million. The only player probably sub 6 million that I'd maybe look at changing to Rogers to is Sarr at Crystal Palace, and I'll talk about him in a minute. I think for a lot of people, you can just hold on to him. The fixture run is still pretty good. He's going to be useful over the next 5 game weeks. Not someone that you urgently need to get rid of unless your team is in trouble this week and you don't have enough players to cover him. So for those of you looking for a new midfielder this week, either to replace Bowen, Rogers, or for any other reason, let's take a look at a few of the options. I think for me, one of the top players to look to bring in this week is probably Anthony Gordon. Not only are Newcastle just in a really good place and playing well at the moment, they've also got the fixtures. Like for an attacker, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Fulham at home. Doesn't get much better. Obviously, you'd prefer like a Leicester and a Southampton thrown in there as well, but the next 5 game weeks look pretty good. And I think in terms of his minutes and place in that team, it's pretty secure. It's looking similar to what it was last season. He's not always playing 90 minutes, but he has started all 4 of the last 4 matches. There was that brief bench in game week 15 when Barnes played, but the front 3 of Gordon, Isak and Murphy is working so well right now. I just don't see Eddie Howe changing that. So although Gordon doesn't have penalties or anything like that, at 7.4 million, that's a pretty nice price. I think if you're looking for a direct move from Bowen, Gordon is definitely the one. I'm recording this before we've seen the Arsenal-Brentford game in Game Week 19, but I think on paper, Odegaard's still not a bad option if you're looking for someone just over that £8 million price point. The fixtures are Brighton away, Spurs at home, Villa at home, Wolves away next 4, and then you've got City at home in 24. Which isn't an amazing fixture, but it's still not that bad either. Look, I don't know what it is about Odegaard. I just can't get excited about him as a pick. And maybe I'll look like an idiot, right? Because you'll watch this and then Odegaard will absolutely batter Brentford and everyone will be looking to bring him in. I just don't know. I think he probably will tick over enough. And I don't mind Bruno Fernandes from Game Week 21. I don't think right now Odegaard is that dissimilar. So maybe it's just personal bias towards Odegaard. Like, he's obviously a great footballer. It's just whether he's a really good FPL pick. And also, I worry a little bit about the Arsenal attack without Saka because he was such a creative component in that team. So I don't think Odegaard is bad. I just much rather bring in Anthony Gordon. And then with Bruno Fernandes, I still think he'll be an okay option for that price. like kind of medium to long term. But this week is not a great week to bring him in. Like Liverpool away is just a really tough fixture. And obviously Man United have not played particularly well the last few games. But they will be better with Fernandes in the team. And after that, you've got Southampton at home, Brighton at home, Fulham away and Palace at home. So I like Bruno, but I think if you're bringing in a player kind of 7 million plus this week, it probably is Anthony Gordon. Mbeumo is someone that people are going to look at. I've still got him in my squad. I'm definitely keeping him for Southampton away. I don't mind playing him against City either, but I'm not sure he's a player that I would bring in. Because although City is not as bad as it usually would be, it's still not great. And then Liverpool at home in 22 is not ideal either. And then after that, it's another away game against Palace. I think Mbeumo is one of those you can definitely keep hold of, and there's no rush to take him out. But I'm not sure I'd bring him in. Like Mbeumo and Gordon's price is not that dissimilar. I'd rather go for the Newcastle man because of the fixtures they've got. I think Mbeumo will do really well in 20 against Southampton away, but I'd rather get Gordon. And then, if you're looking to go a bit cheaper to release funds elsewhere, or maybe you're replacing Rodgers, you've got Eze and Sarr. Now, I went for Eze last week in Game Week 19, and obviously really glad I did that because I'm up on points. But I can't help but feel that I made a mistake. Like, Sarr's underlying numbers in that match were better in that Southampton game than Eze. He stayed on the pitch longer. His minutes look pretty secure. Yes, he's not on penalties, but Eze would need Mateta off the pitch to get a penalty. I still think long-term, Eze is guaranteed minutes as long as he can stay fit, but he has had fitness concerns. And with Sarr, you save a bit of money to be able to spend elsewhere. So I don't think you can go wrong with either of those Palace players. And I'm obviously happy that I've gained 10 points, or 8 points, whatever it is. But I still think long-term, Sarr's probably the play, especially when you count the value. So for me, the top two right now are probably Gordon and Sarr to look at. But Odegaard, Fernandes, Mbeumo, Eze, not bad options. It just depends whether you want to spend the extra on the Palace midfielder and whether you want to bring in the likes of Fernandes and Mbeumo, who have some dodgy fixtures over the next couple of game weeks. So I want to quickly talk about Johan Wissa at Brentford, because in yesterday's video I spoke about Cunha replacements at his price or below, and a few people pointed out that I didn't even mention Wissa, and I think that's a fair comment to make. He's only 6.2 million. The underlying numbers are pretty good this year. It's 0.53 expected goals per 90, which is actually excellent for that price, and he's put up 5.2 points per match, and he's got Southampton away in game week 20. So in that regard, I quite like him. I'm still not completely convinced by the two fixtures afterwards. City at home in 21, Liverpool at home in 22. I think we can all agree the Liverpool game is tough and it's not going to be easy to get returns in that one. It's definitely not too bad playing City right now. I think back to the Leicester game in game week 19. City did win it, and kept a clean sheet, but Leicester did have opportunities in that game to score. I think they even hit the bar or the post on one occasion as well. The Brentford attack is even better than the Leicester one. So they will cause City some problems, but I look at bringing someone in over a 3-game week spell, and they've got City at home and Liverpool home. It just doesn't feel that great, and then you're straight into Palace away in 23. So for 6.2 million, he's certainly not a bad option, but I feel like he falls in between Chris Wood at 6.7, who I think most people would agree is a pretty good option right now, or you look at João Pedro, I think he's 5.7 at the moment, and Wissa is 0.5 million more. Is he worth 0.5 over João Pedro? Some people would probably argue yes. I'm not quite as convinced. Just because I think that 0.5 million could be useful at some point over the next few game weeks. Like, if we look at the returns, I know João Pedro has been poor recently. Like, it's 3 assists since game week 14, no goals since game week 12. But overall, he started 11 times. He's got 4 goals, 5 assists, so 9 attacking returns. For Wissa, who has also done really well this season, he is on 10 attacking returns from 14 starts, so slightly better, and he scored more goals. So I do get why people like him. I just question whether he's worth that 0.5 million more. So I think Wissa has to go down as one of those players that I certainly wouldn't argue against, if you wanted to bring him in. I don't think he's a bad option. The numbers are good. Brentford attack is decent, and his minutes have been good as well. Do I think he's better than João Pedro? Is he worth that 0.5? Because I feel like once I go to Wissa at 6.2, I'd rather just spend the extra 0.5 and get Chris Wood and get the penalty taker as well. He's not someone for me, but if you want to go for him, you're not convinced by João Pedro, Raul Jimenez, you don't have the money for Chris Wood, Wissa is probably one of the next top options. So let's get into some of your questions. How important is it to try and roll transfers now, given the blanks, doubles, and assistant manager chip will be coming soon? Or should we be attacking the game weeks in front of us? Now, I do think it's going to be important to have a bunch of transfers for the double and the blank coming up, and I'll talk about when they are in a second. But you still want to get points in the short term. Put it this way, right? I'm probably going to roll this week. I have 3 transfers in game week 21. I may use 2 of them to get Bruno Fernandes back for Brian in Burma. I'll talk a bit more about that in the team selection video, but I'm not completely against using those transfers despite the double coming soon enough. If we look at the schedule for what's probably going to happen for the rest of the season, you've got a double game week very likely in either 24 or 25, and that's when the Liverpool and Everton postponed game will go into, and the assistant manager chip will be available from game week 24 as well. Then you've got a blank game week in 29. That's for whoever gets to the Carabao Cup final, plus their game week 29 opponents. So if we look at game week 29, if Arsenal and Liverpool get to the final, they will blank, and then so will Chelsea and Aston Villa as well. And if I look at my team at the moment, I've got Trent, Salah from Liverpool, I've got Rodgers from Villa, who I'm probably not going to sell, I've got Cole Palmer as well, and Gabriel and Raya. So I've got 6 players that may blank. Obviously, if Newcastle or Spurs win instead, it's a bit of a different story. But right now, I've potentially got 6 players who could all blank in game week 29. So not only do I need transfers to bring more Liverpool, maybe more Everton players in, but I also then need transfers to deal with the blank in 29. Now, I could potentially use my wild card in game week 30 and just dead end game week 29. And that basically means focusing all your transfers for the next few weeks up until 29 and not worrying about what's coming afterwards, because you might want a wild card. But if you sell Palmer, Trent, Salah for players that are going to play in 29 just to wild card them back in, you may well lose team value doing that. If you definitely want those players back, you've got to pay extra for them. So it might be that free hit is better in 29. Either way, there are chips that are going to have to be used, but they're not going to cover everything, and transfers are going to be important because after 29, you've got a double game week in 33. That's likely to be the teams that blanked in 29. Then you've got a blank game week in 34, so a second blank game week. That's for the FA Cup semi-finalists plus their game week 34 opponent. So if, for example, Arsenal get through to the FA Cup semi-final but Palace go out, those teams would still both blank. So not only have you got to cope with that, you've also got a double game week in 36, which will be the teams that blank in 34. So there's a lot to cover and only so many chips in terms of second wild card and free hit to do it. So as a potential strategy, I don't want to get into this too much. I think it needs its own separate video. But if I was going to do wild card game week 30, free hit in 34 to cover the blank, and then maybe bench boost in 36, that means I've got to deal with the double in 24 and the blank in 29 only with free transfers. So it's not that you shouldn't make any transfers over the next couple of game weeks, but I think you've got to be absolutely sure that it's a pretty big upgrade for your team. Otherwise, you're just going to have to trust the players you've got. So for my front line, I'm happy with João Pedro, sub 6 million. I'm more than happy with Isak. Is Solanke great? Maybe not. I think his returns have been okay, but there's maybe better options out there. But for his price or below, is there any standout that's miles better than Solanke? Probably not. So unless I need the money, I'm probably more likely to roll to help me deal with that double and blank later on. So it is going to get more and more important, but don't ignore the game weeks to come right now. Yes, doubles and blanks are usually extra points if you plan around them well, but there's still plenty of FPL points to come over the next few weeks. In terms of the doubles and blanks schedule, I'll probably do a video after game week 20 talking about it a bit more. Plus, between 20 and 21, we'll have the first legs of the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup third round. So we won't have a ton more info for the blanks and doubles, but we will have a little bit. So I'll do another video on that later. That's just kind of a brief-ish talk about it. So is it too late to buy Isak? I don't want to be chasing points. The simple answer is no. I think if you look at the fixtures that Newcastle have got coming up, like I spoke about earlier with Anthony Gordon, there's still points to come for Isak. Like, he's going to start every single one of these games if he can remain fit and available. He's on penalties as well. His numbers are great. Newcastle playing brilliantly at the moment. Like, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Fulham at home. It's a pretty nice fixture run. There is times in FPL where you don't bring a player in for one reason or another and their price goes up. And then sometimes it's just not worth going there. You try and look elsewhere and hope that you don't get too badly punished. But I think at the moment in FPL, we're at a point in the season where it doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of great forwards to pick from. Like a few weeks ago, it felt like there was tons, right? You could have easily played 3-4-3 and had any number of forwards. But Cunha has now got suspended. He's about to come into a worse fixture run than he's had. Haaland's obviously just too expensive. Wood's fine, of course. Nicholas Jackson's okay, although he's been rotated a couple of times. Watkins, I'm going to answer a question on in a minute, but there's no guarantee he will keep playing when Duran is back. Isak is just a standout right now. His output is great. He's on 12 goals, 4 assists in 17 starts, so 16 attacking returns, nearly one every game. The underlying numbers are just crazy good. It's just really hard to say that you've missed the boat. I will say this. Because of the lack of other forwards and because of his rate of returns, that price is going nowhere but up. So he probably will rise pretty quickly to 9.3 million. So I think if you're going to get him, it's got to be soon. And I just don't see it as chasing points because he's going to continue to get loads of points over the next few weeks. So it's not too late. Obviously, it would have been better if you got him weeks ago. I'm in exactly the same position, but I picked him up against Man United. He's got a goal straight away. There's no reason he can't go and get another 3 to 5 returns over the next 5 game weeks, possibly even more. So nice and simple, is Ollie Watkins nailed? Now, I think he's absolutely nailed to start the Leicester at home game in game week 20. Anything after that, who knows? It's just not a term we can use for Watkins anymore. He was absolutely nailed last year. This year, not so much. There's definitely complications because of Duran. Like if you look at Watkins' minutes, he started in game week 14 against Brentford, only played 64 minutes. Then it was benching against Southampton, Forest, City and Newcastle. And he only came on at half-time in the Newcastle game because of that red card for Duran. Now he did have, if I remember correctly, a bit of a knock going into that Southampton or Forest game, one of the two. But even then, right, he hasn't started the games after that. That is a concern. So because of Duran being suspended for game week 20, Watkins will definitely start. And Duran has been charged for conduct after the red card as well. So he may well get suspended for another match or two. But after that, you just don't know what's going to happen between him and Watkins. And even so, after Leicester, like Everton away in 21 is okay, not amazing. And then Arsenal away in 21 is not great either. So if you've got Watkins, obviously you play him against Leicester and you just wait and see what happens with Duran. But to bring him in, it feels like a very short-term punt, especially when you can't guarantee the minutes longer term and the next 2 fixtures after Leicester are not that great. If you could guarantee that he was going to start all 6 of the next 6 matches, he's a brilliant option. He's on penalties, he's scored the last 2, his underlying numbers are good, the fixtures are decent. But I think right now, if you don't have him, I just think you let him go. And if you haven't got Isak, by the way, there is no way I would buy Watkins just to buy Isak later. I'd just go straight to Alexander Isak. That's such an easy call to make. So Watkins probably will do really well against Leicester, but for most people it's probably one just to forget about and just save that transfer like we spoke about earlier. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. Happy New Year, and I will catch you again tomorrow for the team selection video.